because we are getting to one that has brought up a lot of conversation over the last maybe month or so. I'll give it a month. And it's the idea that USL's D1 league it's out into the public, which is interesting because a lot of the USL owners didn't even know it was coming, but it is here. And the question was, could USL's D1 league be a threat to Major League Soccer? And in I guess true terms of ownership, many no comments on this one. But I think the total was 12. I think we had 12 comments in here, and most of them were, I'm gonna try and use the words correctly here. Most of them were very dismissive, saying, I don't think it will be, rivaling us, because who would be like, oh yeah, I'm an owner in this group and now I'm terrified. I don't think anybody's gonna come out and say that. However, I think people came in and said that they don't think that they're going to be a huge threat, but we hope that they can be the best league possible for hopes of a future maybe merger or use in building up MLS as its own. There's the thought of pro rel in there, which is always a fun conversation with with everybody in that
Yeah.
conversation medium. But I think there are half of them who are like, all right, leave us alone. We're focused on MLS, and the other half are like, listen, it's good. All soccer is good soccer, right? If we can have more good quality soccer, life's good. So, wanted to get your thoughts on that. Where do you stand on this?
So I'm glad that like there wasn't like you said there was some that like just kind of dismissed it, really didn't have a comment, but the ones that did comment, I felt like it was a positive thing, and it should be. Like yes, it's a different league. Yes, you're competitors in a sense, but like you want you want the game to grow here, and this is a perfect opportunity. I don't think that USL is a threat to MLS because there's not the same amount of money in it. It's going to take a very long time because it has taken, what is it, 30 or 25 years for
Mhm.
30 years for MLS to get where they're at today. It is over $500 million just to get your name in the hat as an expansion team. USL does not have any kind of money close to that kind of stuff. And even with their D1, like they're not going to be able to bring the players in that MLS does. Now, maybe 10, 15 years from now, maybe it could be a threat depending on how USL handles their growth and everything. But I like the fact that this is happening. It does introduce, the pro rel even more. But I think one of the executives said like it would be nice if they worked together to help grow. And I would love to see that part. Both leagues, yes, stay separate, but help each other, like give each other a boost to make it just more accessible to soccer here in the US and give that they're just two different leagues completely. MLS is this closed system, it's these big, big money guys where USL is almost more of like development. You could develop players domestically and gives more opportunity in that way. But yeah, to answer the question in itself, I don't believe that it's a threat and it won't be anytime soon.
Yeah, and I'm kind of in the same boat. We had this episode as well. We did this with Matty Casey, and it's kind of the same vibe where it's like I think a lot of people think like, oh my God, everybody in MLS wants USL to die. No, not a
No.
thing, right? You have the individuals who are like, yes, this is the only thing I care about. And you're going to have individuals all over the place. But I think the vast majority of us are like, yes, let's make USL as good as it is. But I think what the interesting point that you brought up was this idea that they're not going to have the money to bring in those players, regardless of if you're a D1 league or not, right?
Yeah.
And if you think about it, right, and maybe it's a faster track than we were on, but you're right. It took 30 years to get where we are today to be signing players. What was the first time we spent 10 million on a player? Right, that was not long ago. It was
Yeah.
relatively recent, right? You're gonna have your diehards in those areas who are gonna support those teams regardless of who they bring in, and we love that, right? That's
Yeah.
gonna be great. But you're not going to see the casual, and I use this term a lot, right? The casual European based, I don't really care about anything except Man City and Liverpool,
Yeah.
are not going to turn around and be like, whoa, USL is a D1 league now. That's the one I'm following.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And
Like it's not
yeah,
going to happen.
and yeah, and the thing that I've always said is that I think the reason why most MLS owners want USL to grow is because eventually there's going to be a merger down the line. Because I think you mentioned like 10 or 15 years, maybe you're starting to get enough interest where you're buying players for 10 mil or so. Can you really last 10 or 15 years on dwindling fan attendance and stuff like that?
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to see that. But what I do think is that after 3 or 4 or 5 years, when you guys are on your fifth year of taking, massive losses and trying to hemorrhage all your bets, because that's what, by the way, that's not me saying, oh, USL sucks. That's me saying that's what MLS did for like 15 years, not just 10. They did it or not just five. They did it for a lot longer than that. So it's inevitable that that would happen here, especially if you're trying to hit the home run ball, right? So if you're going to try to hit the home run ball and say, I'm going to sign the big players and try and draw players in that way, and you don't get the response that you expect, well, that's a lot of money to lose, right? So
Yeah.
if MLS then comes in and be like, hey, we'll take USL Premier, USL Championship, USL One, and we'll take all your teams and we will pay each owner out, I don't know, what do they cost? 20 million to get in. We'll pay each owner out 5 mil, right? You'll recoup some of your investment, not all of it, and maybe you give them a cut to be partial owner in the MLS side of it, whatever. I don't know. I'm not a businessman. I don't know how any of that would work,
Yeah.
but that's the way I see it going, because you can't run that way for 15 years when you have as much competition as you're going to have, right? MLS was able to do that because nobody else was in the game,
Yeah.
right? You can't, like I said, even the European leagues, they weren't in the game at that point because there was no broadcast over here. What did that start in, like 2010-ish, 2012-ish? So, that's when you started fighting across the sea. Now you got to have USL fight MLS and across the sea, and not only just across the sea in multiple other leagues, right?
Yeah.
When I remember when I started watching MLS, it was like, okay, I got MLS and I got the Premier League on NBC. I didn't know
That's
where
it.
didn't know where the Bundesliga was, didn't know where the La Liga was, whatever, right? Now you've got streaming services for all of it. You've got Bundesliga, La Liga, Serie A, Ligue 1, Liga MX, the Scottish League, the Championship. I mean, you could get it anywhere.
And yeah.
So you're sitting here now saying, okay, I'm going to go into this market. I'm going to try and compete with the local league that's already got relatively good following, not massive, but relatively good following. We're going to try and beat them, and then we're going to still have to fight with the people across the pond.
Yeah.
It just doesn't feel like it's a long-term success, but it does feel like it, if we can build up enough of the fan base from MLS as we continue to grow, USL as it might continue to grow, and then we have these two things that have pretty good followings, and we combine them. Now we're up here,
Here. Yeah.
right? And that's the way I feel like this can and should go.
Well, and then also, I can't. I think it might have been Tim Howard on his and Lana Donovan's podcast,
Mm-hmm.
and he mentioned, if you look at American sports, not soccer, but all American sports that have gotten to where they're at today. You did have multiple leagues at one point in time. Like the NBA was what, ABA and something else merger, because it just worked. NFL had also the AFL, ended up merging. Do we know that it's going to happen here? We're not sure, but it could happen that way. And then, like you were saying, like we've seen multiple soccer leagues in the US where they try to make it happen, spend all this money, and then they just fold. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to see that happen for USL. So
No,
hopefully I know a lot of us don't like salary cap. We want the salary cap to be open more for MLS, and we think that it would help. But like you got to make sure that you put restrictions on that so you can continue to grow for the USL. But yeah, I like, as you look at American sports through history, there's always like a merger of some kind, and it has made it for the better. So
right.
potentially we could see this down the line, and I think it would be good for the US in general, but hopefully it's not to the point where like it's because USL is struggling financially that like
Right.
MLS, because really we all know that if it's going to happen, if the merger is going to happen, it's MLS bringing on USL into that realm. But
Right.
I just want it to be where it's not because USL is struggling financially.
No, no. Well, and that's kind of the idea that I think. Like, I don't think MLS wants USL to to fold.
No.
I think they want to get the best markets first, right? So,
Mhm.
if and I use the Indy example, I don't think MLS went to Indy and said we want to expand there. I think the Indy mayor was an idiot and left Indy 11 in the dust and was like, "Yo, let's bring MLS here without you guys,"
Mhm.
right? Now, regardless of that, Don Garber's not going to look at that and be like, "Oh, the mayor wants us to come in and take over a place where USL is, and we could solidify another market." Absolutely. Is Don Garber guilty of being a bad person when it comes to like sports deals? Maybe, right?
Yeah.
That's his job. His job
Yeah.
is to grow this league, not the rest of it, right?
Mhm.
However, I don't think they want him to fold because USL has now got a foothold in the game, right? They've
Mhm.
got soccer specific stadiums. They've got great fan bases. They've got good teams. They've got good talent, right?
Yeah.
They are a landing spot now for college talent. They're a landing spot for overseas talent. They are a place that people want to go. So I don't think MLS wants them to fold. I think MLS wants them to survive long enough where they realize, okay, we can't actually compete with you. Let's work together now. Because I read something, and it was about a year ago, that MLS actually tried to buy USL out already. They approached them at some point and was like, let's get together. And USL said, no thanks.
Mm.
I think that they're waiting for them to get to a point where they got better and they plateau and they realize, oh, maybe this is as far as it gets. Let's talk again. And USL increases how much money they're going to get for their property or their intellectual property, right? They're going to realize, okay, well, you came to us in 2024 and you offered this much. Well, now we have a foothold that is, three times the size, so triple your price. And Don Garber might do it, right? Or and we'll get to it. There's going to be a new commissioner at some point. Maybe the new commissioner doesn't. We'll chat about that in a little bit. But we talked about the fact that Americans are looking to watch a ton of things, whether it be soccer in general, right? Premier League, Champions League, Bundesliga, La Liga, whatever, or other sports, NFL, NBA, college, MLB, NHL, you name it,
Yeah.
right?